Did Loki just doom the multiverse? Welcome back to Nerdist News. I'm Dan Casey, and today we're breaking down the latest episode of Loki. Episode 4, titled Heart of the TVA, contains some of the most brutal moments in the MCU and one of the most shocking endings to date. We're going to break it all down for you in just a moment, including what it means for the fate of the multiverse. Now, if you prefer to read all about it, Michael Walsh has you covered over on Nerdist. But to talk about this in detail, we obviously need to spoil what happens. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about that sort of thing, leave now before it's too late.
All right, let's have a little pie while we wait.
What is the matter with you?
Okay, let's get into it, shall we? Holy sh**, right folks? What an episode! It sounds like they probably should have named him Victor Untimely because he did. He Who Remains' contingency plan is absolutely cooked, like a loose pile of space-time pasta. Turns out that Chekhov's spaghettification warnings were no joke. What is it with the MCU and turning genius scientists into flesh noodles anyway? The final minutes of this episode are among the tensest and most shocking in the MCU, and certainly as impactful as the Loki Season 1 finale.
What?
The episode also feels appropriately emotionally bookended. We begin screaming through the swirling chaos of the sacred timeline toward the Citadel at the end of time, with these distorted voices there in the background. We then end with the sacred timeline's apparent destruction as Loki and company's last-ditch attempt to repair the temporal loom fails in spectacular fashion. Bright white light ensconces the entire frame before a stunning silence and utter darkness. Moving on, the episode's title once again has a dual meaning. As we know, the temporal loom is the literal heart of the TVA. It's the engine that spins raw strands of space-time into the sacred timeline. He Who Remains tended to it like a bonsai tree, religiously pruning it with his army of jackbooted time cops. Yet the title also refers to a character who made Victor Timely's heart go pitter-patter, and Kang's for that matter, Ravonna Renslayer. In the comics, she is Kang's longtime love interest who eventually rises up against him. Dubbing herself the Terminatrix, she basically takes over the Avengers and even infiltrates the Council of Cross-Time Kangs. You know, that interdimensional assembly of Kang variants from across the multiverse? We caught a glimpse of that not-so-august body at the end of Quantumania. We also get to see what actually happened during that recording that Loki discovered in the TVA earlier in the season. It's a quiet moment between Ravonna and He Who Remains in the wake of their victory in the multiversal war. Ravonna was clearly his right-hand woman, his partner in this particular endeavor. But, as we learned last week, neither He Who Remains nor Victor Timely really do partnerships. He Who Remains has Miss Minutes initiate Protocol 42.
42?
It's basically his version of Order 66, but instead of a room full of younglings, it's the childhood memories of everyone inside the Time Variance Authority. Actually, it's all of their memories.
Erase all their memories.
If you say so.
It's a horrifying command to give, and it's undercut only slightly by the fact it's clearly named for the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything from Douglas Adams' seminal Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes, I thought it over quite thoroughly. It is, it's 42.
Much like Ravonna was radicalized to leave the TVA in search of free will at the end of Loki Season 1, this revelation brings her entire world crumbling down around her. She wasn't just any soldier, she commanded He Who Remains' entire army. When Ravonna complained about running the TVA thanklessly for eons last week, she had no idea how much worse it was going to get. And neither did literally everyone else in the TVA. But even a broken clock is right twice a day, and Miss Minutes was right that Ravonna would be angry after learning the truth. Some out there, like X5,
It's Brad.
Brad, saw the writing on the wall. Others, like General Dox and the rest of her co-conspirators, only saw the walls as they were crushed into a space-time meat slurry in one of the all-time grossest MCU moments. And this is just one of the many wrenches thrown into He Who Remains' seemingly carefully laid plans this episode. In the event of his untimely death, he instructed his two most trusted lieutenants to give a timely version of himself a copy of the TVA guidebook, and doing so sent young Victor Timely astray from the sacred timeline into a branch timeline. But while He Who Remains claimed to have been the guiding hand behind everything in Loki Season 1, he clearly didn't account for Loki, Sylvie, and everybody else interfering with his posthumous plans this time around. Because your bootstrap paradox is doomed to get tripped up if the gods of mischief then tie your proverbial shoelaces together. And speaking of paradoxes, we get to see more of that causal loop play out in real time as Obi and Victor Timely geek out over meeting each other.
So if your work is based on his work and his work is based on your work...
Exactly which came first.
This episode also has us wondering if Obi should start going by DB, Doc Brown, because look at the way he builds his models.
Forgive the shoddy and slapdash work. It's not to scale. I only got one coat of paint on there.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
And yet, when it comes to He Who Remains as best laid plans, it's not a matter of meddling mischief gods or vengeful exes and chess apps that prove to be his ultimate undoing. It is time itself. Time hasn't run out, it's overflowing. There's simply too much of it to contain, and the way it overloads the temporal loom is shocking to say the least.
Okay, that sounds like a noise you want to hear from farther away.
Loki and Sylvie ultimately manage to emerge victorious, at least against Ravonna and Miss Minutes, by deactivating the TVA's magic dampeners.
Turn it off!
And they narrowly avoid a temporal paradox with some timely pruning. Unfortunately, they're not so lucky when it comes to the temporal loom. That moment at the end of the episode plays out like a horror movie. Everyone's left to reckon with the cosmic implications of their one and only hope spaghettifying before their very eyes. And what follows plays out in what appears to be a visceral visual homage to two of the most iconic multiverse stories in Marvel Comics. The resultant explosion engulfs the TVA. It fills the room with a blinding white light, cutting off the music mid-orchestral swell. And it looks remarkably similar to 2015's Secret Wars, in which the Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe are summarily destroyed in the final moments of an incursion event. For those who may have forgotten, an incursion event is the result of two Earths colliding into one another, destroying both universes in the process. And we know it's what happens when the fabric of the multiverse is weakened. Doctor Strange evidently caused one in Multiverse of Madness, and Kang invoked the endless incursions he witnessed during the multiversal war in Quantumania. Now, Secret Wars aside, this could also be the start of something else, because, as our good pal Hector Navarro pointed out, the sequence also bears a strong visual similarity to the end of the first issue of House of M. In that 2005 storyline, Wanda Maximoff used her chaos magic to reshape the very fabric of reality. The entire world is transformed into a strange new planet ruled over by Magneto's family, the titular House of M. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Hey, Dan, didn't they do that exact story in WandaVision? And yes, they did, sort of, but different. And look, I'm not expecting to see Eric Lencher or like Ralph Boner anytime soon.
Boner.
And people are too busy bickering over reading comprehension or lack thereof when it comes to Wanda's potential fate in Multiverse of Madness. But the visual similarity between what happened here and what happened at the end of the first issue of that story is undeniable. Plus, we have to consider the fact that we still have 2 episodes to go. So, what happened in the wake of this literal time bomb? Well, our best guess is that the sacred timeline's been destroyed. Or maybe more accurately, it's been rent asunder. The threads that wove together to form it are splintered, frayed, and fractured, and our heroes will likely return to their various branch timelines from whence they came. Honestly, for Mobius, it's a fate worse than death. He's been avoiding learning more about his real life and his real past like the plague. Earlier in the episode, Sylvie takes him to task for wanting key lime pie when the fate of trillions of lives hangs in the balance.
You found out you're a variant, and you haven't even looked, have you?
And yeah, Sylvie's right. For Mobius, this really is just another bad day at the office. He has never bothered to look at one of those lines on a monitor to see if it's actually his timeline. Or maybe he has, and we don't know about it. But as we can deduce from the trailers and Brad's snide comments in episode 2, we'll pay a visit to Mobius's timeline in the near future. And chances are he worked at that power sports store we saw previously in the trailers, maybe selling personal watercrafts and explaining that jet ski is actually a brand name.
You know, the funny thing about jet skis, everyone thinks that it's a personal watercraft.
I don't care.
So what are Loki and Sylvie to do? Should they just accept that free will's been restored, walk away and call it a day? I mean, that would be a pretty boring show. Besides, Loki may not have agreed with He Who Remains, but he at least understood the method to his madness.
We got to the man at the end of time, and he made sense.
And while the TVA is a rotten institution in dire need of overhauling, it's also keeping timelines safe from the threat of multiversal war, incursion events, and total annihilation. As Loki tells Sylvie, annihilating is easy. Trying to fix what's broken is hard. Hope is hard. But Loki isn't an optimist. He is, as he reminds Sylvie, a god. They both are. And that divinity might just be what helps them rise to the occasion to save the day and try to undo the damage that's been done. Of course, they'll still have to contend with plenty of time slipping and potential spaghettification, as the trailers have teased, but that's to be expected when the temporal loom is blown to smithereens. The real question is, what happened to Ravonna Renslayer when she got pruned? Is she outside of space and time in the void like where Loki went back in season 1? Would that have spared her from the chaos of the temporal loom's destruction? Or is she back in her timeline rediscovering her own glorious purpose?
Glorious purpose!
And has Miss Minutes been defeated once and for all? Or will she return with another impression of Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park?
Magic word.
Please!
And perhaps most importantly, is the key to stopping all of the time-slipping and chaos of the sacred timeline's destruction finding another Kang variant. Maybe one that will ultimately start the Kang dynasty that only the Avengers can stop, or try and fail to stop because it's going to be 2 movies. After all, He Who Remains likely had more than one plan in the works. His words to Ravonna before he wiped her mind were the same as his words to Sylvie when she killed him.
See you soon.
See you soon.
As with all of these questions, only time will tell. But as we've seen on this show, time is a precious commodity, and it's running out.
You've got about an hour. You've got about 5 minutes.
Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about Loki Episode 4. We'll have even more deep dives for you over on Nerdist in the days ahead, but for now, tell us, what did you think of this episode? Did you spot anything that we missed?
About this hot cocoa machine, could I take a look?
Can you sit tight for just a second?
Let us know in the comments below. And for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.